Hey Maria, back with another video. It's like 7:16. I went to bed around 7 last night, so I've been in bed for about 7 hours. I did get off and on last night, but just decided to make a video now. So I was thinking today about cleansing these feelings out of my system, and I'm not trying to continually rag on those families, and I'm saying those families, I'm talking about my blood relations, Piggy's family, and the Collins, I'm not even going to bring them up because I don't even get that. But anyway, my point is that when I feel forced and coerced and tricked into doing something that is against my will, and that wasn't my choice, and it wasn't in their place to make that decision for me. So with that being said, I'm glad that I'm taking these steps to separate myself and, try to build a better life for myself without them. It's the best thing for me, and it's the right decision. So I wanted to also talk about, kind of touch on the asexuality situation. It's not that, I understand that, sexual intimacy is supposed to be shared between, partners or whatever. It is just that in my experience, and from what I observe, by a lot of people tend to look at sex in an animalistic way. And I have, over the years, associated sex with selfishness, okay? Because I've seen selfish acts done by people in order to get things from people, and then leave them in a situation that they didn't want to be in. Like, for example, I'm not saying anybody twisted my arm to have a child, okay, because, obviously it takes two, but it's funny how, a lot of women lower their standards so that they could be with somebody because they're so, love starved, or they want the attention or whatever. And then, you find out this guy's a total jerk, and then he doesn't pay child support, or he leaves you in a situation or whatever. And it's not that, I'm just saying is, I think people put too much emphasis on sex, and they don't focus enough on the mental or the emotional bond. So in my mind, the reason why I've developed those feelings, is because I've dealt with abuse. I associate sex with abuse. I do. In some ways, I do. And, because of that, I don't let my mind venture into that direction as much. Only because to me, I have an aversion towards people anyway. So through the years, I've tried to, dissect it and, come up with the solutions. Maybe, it's not that I don't think men are good to be good looking or anything. It's just that I'm not really interested in developing relationships like that. I mean, because most of the time I would say most people don't have the moral standards that I have. They don't tend to, they just tend to come off as extremely animalistic, and because of that, when I'm saying animalistic, I'm saying they're sex obsessed, to the point of where, they don't want to talk, they don't want to develop any sort of dialogue, they don't care about your likes, your interests, anything about that. All they express is this desire to, be that way, and I'm not going to be that way. Those things, for some people, some women are more, I don't know what you call it, they have emotional fulfillment. That's their first priority. And so, I personally think there's a lot of women out there who become lesbians for that reason. Now, some people are born gay, and I think there's some people who make conscious decisions to be lesbians because in their mind they're thinking, well, I'm an emotional creature, and so I'm going to go and find a woman who is also an emotional creature, and therefore I can find fulfillment. Now, I have actually, that thought has crossed my mind, okay? But once again, having sex with a woman does not interest me at all. I mean, it would just really kind of gross me out. So I'm not, I'm more leery towards people based on experiences of abuse, okay? So when you're dealing with that sort of stuff, I have to be very careful, and I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm going to be abused, okay? And in this situation, I feel completely abused, okay? I feel abused in the situation, and I don't want to, I won't be that way. I don't want it. So, people have to be careful, and I shouldn't be, picked apart because of it. If anything, I should be, understood, so, now going back to my family and Piggy's family, I'm glad they're being purged from my life because, it's unfortunate because, like for example, I lied to Piggy about my race when I first got together with him, okay? But in some ways I feel as though he's misled me because by the looks of his family, at least his mom and him, the relationship and the pictures of him and his mom and his dad and everything, I was led to believe that they were from a wholesome family, that they came from something, a good up and up family. Like, maybe his mom was a little snooty, she may have had her shortcomings, but I was under the impression that they were from a good, old-fashioned, wholesome family, when in fact they're not, okay? So I'm not really, I don't want that, I don't want it. And I wish him well, and I really do, but it's just, I don't want it, and I will reject it 100%. It's not something that is of any value to me. So, since they're not who they said they were, and I'm not exactly what I said I was, let's just let it go at that. I'm fine with that. I wish him the best. I hope that things work out in his life, and but I don't believe in that sort of thing. And then to like, for example, when I think of selfishness, I mean the lengths that people go for that sort of gratification. They don't think about how it destroys the life of other people. Now, for example, Polly raised him to be that way, okay? And so he exists for her gratification. That there is a form of abuse, okay? It's abuse. And, if he doesn't recognize it, well, he's become accustomed to it or whatever, but still, ultimately, somebody shaped and molded his mindset without his consent, and now he's become who he is, and that's the way it is. But still, the underlying foundation is based on abuse. Now, I'm not going to say that, I'll never fall in love, or I don't want that, but, that forceful obsession about sex cannot be the main focal point in a relationship. It cannot be, I have a lot to offer a person. I'm a good person. I'm a honest person. I'm a dedicated person. I'm a very loving person. I'm very emotionally fulfilled person, and that's what I would have to look for first. And then, if I feel emotionally fulfilled, then everything else will fall in place. So I'm not interested in somebody who just wants to talk about that or show that when people display an animalistic nature, like they're just constantly talking about sex, everything is sex, everything is obsessed about it, then I don't really want to be around them because, as a child, I experienced that kind of abuse and I didn't like it, okay? So therefore, I don't want to see any of that played out in my life, okay? I'm not wanting to deal with that. So, and that should be completely understood. I mean, it's not that, and because I made those decisions, which I think are great decisions, why should I lower my standards for something like that? It doesn't benefit me. So, yeah. So now I'm going back to, how this ties into employment. I don't know if it does or not, or is it more like the race or religion thing or whatever, but I do think that my stance on sex has played a role in it. And I think these people are completely misunderstood. I mean, I feel as though I have the right to feel the way that I do because I do associate sex with abuse. I do. To me, that's when I think of the way that some men approach women, the way that I feel as though they go into the whole, they kind of put a lot of pressure and they kind of demand it, or they're constantly alluding to it, or whatever. I do feel like it's overwhelming, and it becomes a big trigger for me to avoid that abuse. I don't want to deal with abuse. So, I think what people did is basically abuse me again for something that I was trying to avoid, which is just ridiculous. I'm not trying to like overdo or emphasize being a victim, but by constantly, focusing on it, you're kind of putting me in that position again. So I don't need that. It's more traumatizing. So, yeah, I just want to be, I'm just a person who set goals for themselves. I have to live. I have to survive. I want to enjoy my job. If I find somebody that I feel I click with, then great, But that is a very, that's not a top priority to me. I need to protect myself from abuse, period. I have to protect myself from being abused. And people like me, people who are alone, women who have basically nobody, are going to be open targets for abuse. And I don't need employers going around exploiting that. I just don't. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up, and I will be back with another one. Oh, and by the way, I'm not saying that, I was ever a lesbian, but it was something that I considered, only because I kept thinking, well, if men are constantly, focusing on the animalistic nature of it, then I would rather just have someone that I could be emotionally attached to. But then again, like I said, most people, they want the sexual intimacy, and I could never be sexual with a woman. I just can't. I think women are beautiful, I really do, but I'm not sexually attracted to women. So, and I'm just not. I think they're beautiful. I think they're, I like looking at them. I love admiring their style. I look at, their facial features. I look at their, how they dress and everything, and it's something to admire. But as far as being sexual with a woman, that just doesn't appeal to me. Just doesn't, So if I would say I'm fine the way that I am. I'm comfortable. I don't wake up in the morning daydreaming about sex. I don't think about it. Now, like for example, when I look at pictures of David Bowie, I'm like, oh my God, he's gorgeous, But there's something about him. I think it's his mannerisms. It's how he carries himself, And he's an exception, you know what I mean? And I'm not talking about early Bowie. Now, early Bowie was more like, he was extremely artistic, and I was intrigued by his flair and his ability to express himself, okay? That's different. But as far as, like, how somebody looks, like men that look like that, like the older version of him, very polished, very polished. I mean, he just looks so well put together. And then he's extremely intelligent anyway, and the way he conducts himself. I mean, he's very, he just had his crap together, okay? So therefore, you can't help but think, gosh, I mean, look at him, and then the way he speaks, he's so eloquent in everything he does, so, yeah, I mean, my standards are pretty high, so that's just how it is. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video.